Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Creemee Cast. I'm live here in Northfield, Vermont, the center of the universe, as you all know, and I have a pretty special guest today. I'm pretty excited about this. We've been talking about doing this for a while, and Alison Despathy is here with me. How are you today, Alison?
I'm doing great, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. This is such an honor to have you here.
It's an honor to be here.
It's pretty cool.
It is. It's
one
awesome.
One of our first guests on Creemee Cast, so welcome. Alison is a contributor to the Vermont Daily Chronicle. She wouldn't describe herself as an activist necessarily in Montpelier, and I think that's fair. She's more somebody who's down there advocating for good government and responsible government here in Vermont, which we don't have enough people down in Montpelier doing that. And if you're somebody who does do that, by the way, you are very quickly made an enemy. And I think I'm so excited to have Alison here on the show with me because we've maybe experienced some similar experiences, and maybe you have a little bit more than I have. But welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much. And your place is great. It's so nice to see it coming together. It's exactly what we need in Vermont. We've got to balance out the conversation here, and I feel like this is the way to do it because people have to know what's going on. And so many times people don't know what's going on. We've got a lot of I don't want to say, but actually kind of biased news.
Yeah.
We don't really get the whole story. Like, what is really happening there?
No, I think that's fair. I couldn't agree more. I think it's biased, and I think that people aren't honest about why there's certain driving agendas behind the news that we're getting in Vermont. And that's not necessarily an attack on anyone specific, but I do believe that here at the Vermont Daily Chronicle, we have total freedom of speech, and we're trying our best to report the real news.
Yes, exactly. And it's not just establishment media. And I just have to say on that, major props to Guy on this. I remember I was banned, like many, from Front Porch Forum, like many of us who are, offering a different perspective, a different voice. And I remember I tried to post something, and it was from Vermont Daily Chronicle, and they emailed me back and they said, nope, this is misinformation. You're not allowed to post Vermont Daily Chronicle. We're not allowing it on Front Porch Forum. And I emailed them back, like all of us have had these little engagements, so many of us. And I emailed them back and tried to push for it. Nope. I let Guy know, and Guy had the best response. It's not verbatim. I don't remember it verbatim, but it was basically like, I exist because of these hall monitors.
Sure.
People who want to guide the conversation versus just let the people speak. We're all adults. We can make our own decisions. So I'm so grateful for Guy and Vermont Daily Chronicle and what you're doing here.
Thank you.
It's really the voice of the Vermonters.
It is. And it's actually increasingly becoming that way. It seems to me, maybe people disagree, but I think that our page certainly has been growing on social media. Our subscribership has been growing, and the messaging coming out of Montpelier has been changing. And I think there's a lot more people that are concerned about the cost of living here. I mean, you can put a lot of the other issues aside, but that's the big thing that it comes down to a lot of people. It's like, how am I going to afford to live here? I love this state. It's my home, but we got some pretty serious financial problems. And that's an understatement. And it seems that the Democratic supermajority, they just don't want to reckon with it. I don't know why, but maybe we can get into that a little bit today.
Oh, absolutely. But that's a big deal.
There's one thing I do want to talk to you about. This is a story that you wrote today, and it's, let's see here. I'd have it pulled up. Bullied Cabot schoolgirl has nowhere else to go. This was published today in the Vermont Daily Chronicle, of course, by Alison. And what is this about? What's going on in Cabot?
Yeah. So Cabot is next to me. I'm Danville.
Okay.
And Cabot's next door. And I have a really big community of people that I work with and friends in Cabot. So very connected to what's going on there locally. A lot of homeschooling crew. We have these great homeschool classes and connections that we do. And it's just been heartbreaking. I've had people reaching out to me from the school really for the past few months with just major concerns about what's happening there. There's chronic bullying. It's not being dealt with. It's a nightmare in the kindergarten what's happening. It's obviously not the school's fault, but the school has to take responsibility for what goes on, within the walls there. And that's where there's so many things that play into it. I mean, you've got sometimes parents who aren't engaged. My phone's ringing, of course. Sorry.
That's okay. That happens.
Sorry. Yeah.
That's part of the show.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Yeah, no, but there's so many reasons. There's drug problems, there's neglect problems, there's, lack of parental engagement. So you've got the behavioral issues happening, and it's completely impacting what is going on in the school right now. And there's so many parents that are upset because they don't feel like their children are getting, a good educational opportunity, and they're constantly dealing with behavioral issues and bullying. So this woman reached out to me, and just a really heartbreaking story,
Yeah.
as I wrote in there. And I tend to write long, but this was probably one of the longer ones, but there was a lot to say. And this woman, Brianne Russillo, she moved from New York. She was first in Morrisville. Her daughter went to People's Academy. Really happy, great experience. They bought a home in Cabot, setting up shop, really happy to be there. As soon as she started school, things were going good for a little bit, and then it just was a nightmare. It's a small school. She wasn't connecting with some of the students. There was definitely bullying going on. She now struggles with some health issues specifically because of this. And her mom, Brianne, is amazing. She's like a mama bear, and she'll do anything for her daughter.
Sure.
And she's just been really fighting hard. What are my options? School board, superintendent, principal, teachers, who can help me? No one has offered her options. She tried for the lottery, where you can tuition out to another public school.
That's right, school choice.
Yeah, kind of like a school choice thing. They have 10 slots, and she had high hopes because her daughters struggle. She didn't qualify for that. So now she's going next week in front of the school board because of the Vermont statute, where you can petition to have your child tuitioned out to a school of choice where they're going to be supported and thrive.
That's right.
And the question is, will the school board allow this to happen? Because they get so concerned about losing money, losing students. If they allow this to happen for Brianne's daughter, is it going to set a precedent, and then they have to do it for other students? And then there's a lot of people not happy with the school. What's that going to look like? But the bottom line really is it's not serving the student. If we were about a student-centric, a child-centric situation for education, she would have been back at People's Academy. Why is she struggling through this? It's really constant bullying and discomfort that she's having. There's always an incident. I mean, Brianne is a rock for her. She's been really solid for her. Fortunately, they have a great connection, mother-daughter. But it's just heartbreaking. She shouldn't have to struggle and suffer in that school. And she shouldn't be told, well, your options are you can homeschool or you can move. That's just not acceptable. They own a home.
Sure.
We all know what housing is like these days to
Property
try to find
taxes.
something. Exactly. They're paying property taxes as well. And she's not in a situation to homeschool. So it has to be about the student. And that's where we're so far removed from that. When you listen in the committees at the Statehouse, it's so much just about the money. The money, keeping all the money. The money has to go to the public schools. Public schools are the options. Most communities love a small school in in their small towns, but they have to serve the students. And that's what we're running up against right now is so many times it's about, the social emotional. And yes, we want these kids to be supported. But if they're not getting an educational opportunity, that's the whole point. That's in the Vermont Constitution. They have to provide an educational opportunity for these students. And if they're just focused on behavior control and bullying management, they're not getting that. And they're not even doing that well. I mean, another heartbreaking story, I have these families reach out. I don't want to necessarily talk about it because I think there's some legal process happening around it.
Sure.
But bottom line, chronic bullying not being dealt with, a lot of students unhappy, not feeling safe, and not getting educational opportunity. And that's a problem.
It's a huge problem.
It is.
What are some of this in the situation in Cabot? What are the discrepancies between the students? Between the daughter and the student. Like, is she being singled out for certain cultural differences between her and some of the other Cabot people, or is it?
No, it's not necessarily that. I think it's like sort of some of the kid stuff that goes on. And in a larger school, I mean, there's a lot to be said for a small school. They can be great, and some people thrive in them.
Yeah.
And I'm not putting down the Cabot school with regards to, there's some kids that love it, and they thrive there, and great. But if you're not thriving there, then what happens? And you have a small group of kids. They've got 38 kids in the high school. So if you're being singled out, it's not like you can just go easily find a new friend group.
No.
So she's really limited. And again, you talk about these kids spend 8 hours a day, sometimes more, 5 days a week in this school. This is their life experience. This is them shaping how they feel about themselves, how they interact, how they feel about the world.
Sure.
And that's the piece that I think is so frustrating is like, we can do something about it. We need to do something about it. And it can't just come down to, well, sorry, it's got to be about funding and you have to stay here. It has to be about the student. And that's what's not happening right now. And I think that's really across the board. I mean, a lot of schools are going through situations like this. Like even what's happening in the kindergarten at Cabot, there's a lot of, they call them well, across the board in the school, they call them the trauma kids, right or wrong. This is just the name given to some of these kids who are coming from homes where parents are doing drugs, the kids are doing drugs, there's foster situations, and there is a lot of disruption because of it. And I'm not saying that I have an answer, but when there is a child who is struggling, they need options. And that's what the school has not been supportive at providing for Brienne and her daughter. And she's trying everything. She really is. So we'll see where it lands. But I think the reason I wanted to write about it, not only because, like, as a mom, it really struck my heart, and I see how hard Brienne is working for her daughter, but it just presents, I think, one of the problems with this public school monopoly.
Yeah.
It has to come back to the student, and we're so far from that. We're so far from that.
So maybe this is a good segue into some of the other topics. It's like, why do you think that is? We're so far from that, and I think that there's some of this that's happening in the school boards throughout the state, but how does that relate? I think a lot of people don't quite understand how their legislature actually influences their school funding and the education funding, and not only that, but like the mandates coming out of the state and the federal government, and what is supposed to be taught within these public schools. So what do you think that is? Why do you think there's such a disconnect between the families and the actual administrations?
Right. So it's interesting. My mom taught first grade for 40 years. Some public school, I think mostly public schools, some private school as well. And she has said to me, just looking over the decades, she said so many times there's parents that are not involved anymore. These kids aren't getting executive functioning. They're not getting, like, here's your step-by-step process. Can you go do this? Can you go get your backpack? Can you put your shoes on? And she feels that so many times what she has seen is that a lot of the parents are like, here, go to school, and then the expectation is the school is supposed to do everything versus the parents being engaged.
Sure.
So I think that's like one of the issues that's going on there. But then I think that from a sort of funding standpoint, you get to the schools keep blaming the state keeps blaming the schools, and many times the school boards are supposed to represent the communities and the taxpayers and the students and the families.
That's right.
But if they become a sort of arm or an extension of the administration, then they're not able to serve the taxpayers and the students and the families in the way they're supposed to. They're supposed to really make sure that the school is doing a good job. And so I think what we're running into, I mean, obviously we're all feeling it right now, especially with the property tax piece, is the spending. It's absolutely out of control spending. And I think you have to reach a point with the schools where you're willing to do a reduction in force, where you're willing to say, like, I'm sorry, we don't want you to lose your job, but we don't need all these positions right now. Like, how much can the taxpayers be expected to add new positions every year and to keep funding new positions when there's dwindling enrollments? So that's part of, I think, the real conversation.
No, I think you're 100% correct, and I think it's becoming an increasingly important conversation, because I think for the first time, a lot of people, they're not having faith in the system like they used to, and not just the school system. It's ultimately the institutions as a whole.
Right.
But they're wondering, I think people are being forced to reckon, like, wow, maybe things are a lot worse than we ever could have realized. And I think that's the truth, unfortunately. So maybe you could explain a little bit, for like, how is how are the schools funded? Like, how, because I kind of have an idea, right? But like everybody else, I'm relying on my school board and I'm relying on my legislators to explain it. And I hate to say it, but they're not all that good at explaining it either.
Right,
And that's not a knock on them. It's just the reality. It shouldn't be that complicated. Your legislature should be able to explain it to you.
Right.
But anyhow, maybe you can.
Well, I think in a nutshell, what I would say is the school obviously has a budgeting team. The school board has a budgeting team, and they're supposed to create the budget. And so they create the budget based on, needs and where we're at and what do we expect, et cetera. And then that obviously gets presented to the town, and the town has an option to vote yes or no, et cetera. And obviously we're seeing like a big revolt happening, and people basically exerting their right to say, no way, this is out of control. And this goes back to, I think, Representative Beck, who's like, one of the education finance gurus. We don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem.
Yeah.
And that's gone haywire because it's really the point. And he said it at the Republican press conference best. He said, if you have a school who can spend a quarter and get $1, they're going to do that. So there's such a disconnect between the actual spending and then what they're going to get from the state, because all the money's gathered, taxes, it goes into a pool,
Yep.
and then it's dispersed to the towns, right, based on budgets. And so many times I would get so upset with our superintendent because he'd be like, oh, don't worry, like so many people in this town, their taxes aren't going to change. But the bottom line is somebody's taxes are going to change.
That's right.
Because somebody has to pay for that, and that money has to come from somewhere. So this is where we're in the spending frenzy. And I would just say on that note is that with what just passed out of Ways and Means, so this
Today.
was like the yield bill,
Yep.
and I think Guy just posted this up.
I'm pretty sure he did. Yeah, I think it's something he put up on. Yeah, he did put on the Daily Chronicle.
And
today.
that was great because the one concern was there was a cost containment aspect to that bill. And then you have the Vermont School Board Association, the Vermont principals, the Vermont superintendents, the NEA, who come out and they say, no, we have to remove that cost containment. And so then again, you have this option for free spending versus how do you contain this level of spending. And there are some schools. Oh gosh, his name is David. He's down in southern Vermont. He had a 3.5% increase compared on the budget. Mm-hmm. Amazing. Compared to like 15% or 40%. But it's really a systemic issue because in general, what are we looking at? We're over a $2 billion education fund.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's incredible.
It's really, really crazy. It's as we all know, because we're all feeling it, it's out of control.
Why do you think that there's such a disconnect between schools, administrations, and the rest of us? I mean, how come? Why do you think they don't understand that there's only so much money to go around, and if we're not making money, right? Like, so the schools themselves are not producing value other than what they're teaching, mm-hmm. which we can argue about whether or not that's valuable. Mm-hmm. But if they're not producing value, how come they don't understand that you can't just keep raising salaries, increasing benefits, etc.?
Right.
Where's the disconnect? Why don't they understand this?
I know. And I think some of it is out of their control because of the contract piece. But then again, I think
that is true.
There's that part of it.
Yes.
Yeah. And then there's just the we'll throw money at it. Let's throw money at it.
Yeah.
We can do this. We're going to make it better. And that they've been doing that forever.
Yeah.
It was like Act 46, Act 60, 127, like this recent Act 127. It's really a nightmare.
Yeah, it is. And I can't help but to wonder, I mean, you have some of the smartest people supposedly in the world working on this stuff. What was that, last year? Mm-hmm. Some of the smartest people in the world working on this stuff. You can't tell me that some of them didn't foresee that this is going to be a problem.
Right.
And I have a couple comments here. EJ writes, too many administrators and teachers. Mm-hmm. Okay. And he also writes, because there are no conservatives involved in the decision making.
We don't have fiscal responsibility because of that. Exactly. Yeah. That's so right. It's totally it. Too many within AOE period. We have to really look at those numbers.
Agency of Education for anyone run. Yep.
Yes. And then definitely, like he said, we're missing fiscal responsibility. And with a supermajority, they can plow ahead. We don't even have to listen to the other party, etc. And that's where we end up in this problem. Yeah. So taxes keep getting higher and things are more expensive and we're spending and we all know, we live it. We're all fearful. I mean, the governor talked about that at the press conference today. You can speak to that, right?
Yeah. So the governor today at the press conference, somebody asked him, Governor, are you receiving more an increase of messages, letters, communications as a whole from people, from Vermonters? Have you seen an increase? And he said, no, I haven't seen an increase necessarily, but what I'm hearing is that people are scared. Mm-hmm. People are genuinely afraid. Mm-hmm. They're afraid that they won't be able to afford to live here anymore, and they're actually coming up with options to get out of here. And I think that's what is so frustrating and scary to a lot of us, is like, we shouldn't have to be afraid to live here. And we are. And it's I say this speaking like just off the cuff. It's like these people are genuinely like scary.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's heartbreaking. Like, I remember like running into people down at Marty's first stop in Danville, and this woman came up to me because she reads some of my stuff in the Cal Record and Vermont Daily Chronicle. And she's like, my husband and I are in our 70s and we're both still working. And now we're considering, do we have to get a second job if we want to stay here? Like, what's wrong with that picture? I know there's inflation because of rampant federal spending and, that whole component, but we can exert some control on a state level. But what we're looking at, what are we looking at? Increased electric rates if the renewable energy standard goes through. If the clean heat standard is approved next year, we've got higher costs in heating fuel. They're looking at a tax on a cap and invest program on the gas and the diesel for cars. And then add the property tax. Oh, and then sorry, what about the $100 million what's it called, payroll tax
That's right.
for childcare that you may not need, but you're still going to pay for
Everybody's paying for
that
it.
one is so painful. It's so painful for people.
So what else do you know about that?
The payroll tax?
Yeah.
Well, there was 340. So 340 was an option, and I think maybe that maybe came from the governor of how are we going to support the families, the people that need help with childcare. You go to them. If they need help, they can seek help, and that could happen. But instead, we decided, what does a supermajority like to do? What's their favorite saying?
Raise taxes.
We'll raise taxes. It's like we're going to stand up a program. We're going to stand up a whole new program. And what does that mean? It's going to cost money. People have to staff it. You've got to pay for them.
Sure.
So how much is getting held up in the bureaucracy, not going to the people, when it could have just been like, hey, let's help this mom. She needs help with childcare, versus you're all paying.
Everybody.
Yes, and that's heartbreaking, because you think about the seniors. You think about seniors who are on a fixed well, obviously, they're not getting the payroll thing, but people who are working who are older, and they now have to kick in. They've already had their children.
Yeah, like the people you just mentioned, who the people who are considering taking a second job.
Exactly.
They've already raised their kids and might even be raising grandkids.
Exactly. And now they have to pay into this. And what if someone's, saving because of health bills, or they have to make a car payment, or, it's like that type of mentality of there's not going to be one size fits all, and they keep trying to do the one size fits all. Look what we did. We created this program, and it's just not a great approach. That's more of the destructive legislation versus let's have a strong social safety net. Let's help the people who need it, and let's let the other people keep as much money as possible and do what they want with it.
Absolutely.
Is that a novel idea?
No, it's not. It's not. And actually, I think it's becoming more and more obvious to a lot of people. Okay, this system's getting complex, and it's confusing, and nobody understands what's going on. And it's like, it shouldn't have to be.
Right.
Yeah. Right. I was actually thinking about that today when I was at the press conference. It's like, the businesses that I know that are really successful, it's not complex. It's pretty easy to understand. You're selling a product, or you're doing a service.
Right.
It's very simple. And for whatever reason, like in Vermont, these super majority Democrats, they want to change and save the frickin' world. We're going to do anything and everything, and it's going to be the most complex idea you've ever heard of, and you're not even going to be able to explain it to your grandfather, and he's going to be mad because he can't understand it, and everybody's just mad. Right. Nobody has a clue what's going on, exactly. And I think that's part of the program. It just doesn't make any sense. Alan Section writes, by the way, it's way past time for us taxpayer revolt.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Amen to that.
And I like the phrase taxpayer revolt because it doesn't necessarily imply anything violent. We're all just kind of like, hey, you know what? I might just stop paying.
I know. And it's like, no, I cannot and I will not. And it's enough is enough.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really the bottom line of what it comes down to. How much can we? And I feel like that is some of the mentality of the supermajority of just give us your money. We'll disperse it properly. We'll give it all where it's supposed to be. And all of us already pay, taxes. We pay our income tax. We pay our property taxes if we have those. It's just, it can't keep, you just look at every little angle they're looking at of how can we tax you? Where can we tax you? And then the use of carbon. We're going to use carbon to tax you now. And that I think is just hideous. It's really just another way to plug in how can we collect money.
Death by 1,000 cuts.
I know, and that's what it feels like this time around. But people are waking up. I mean, my gosh, yeah,
people are very pissed off. There's this what is it, S-258, this wild fish and wildlife bill.
Oh, I know, the banning coyote hunting. That one is so heartbreaking.
Well, people are. I really do believe that this is the one that's going to take a lot of people over the edge.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've been hearing from a lot of people that do not pay attention to politics. Oh boy, maybe everybody heard a motorcycle go by.
We're at the Indy 500.
Yeah, that's what we call this. I mean, it's an old car dealership, so why not?
Right.
But anyway, I've been hearing from more and more people that they're really, really fed up, and they're afraid and they're concerned and they don't know what's going on. And,
I know.
And the fact that people feel like, oh my God, we're going to lose our hunting rights. I mean, that's a pretty big deal.
I know. That one breaks my heart, especially with Northeast Kingdom. And I had written in the Vermont Daily Chronicle just my support for coyote hunters with dogs, because I live next to Steam Mill Brook Reserve. So we've got 10,000 plus acres that I hike in all the time.
Sure.
And I wasn't raised with hunting. I wish I was. I wish I had those skills. I'm a plant person. But I'm so grateful for the coyote hunters, because again, I know they're keeping them contained. They're keeping them sort of within a boundary space of don't go infringing into people's, lands and animals. And there's more of a chance they're going to stay in the right place with those coyote hunters. And all the coyote hunters that I know, and I know many in our area, like absolutely love their dogs, love being out there in the woods. They're so connected with nature. And I think that that's what's heartbreaking, because again, it's like it's a Vermont tradition.
Yeah.
It really is.
Well, I was talking with some people a few weeks ago at the statehouse. One of them a lobbyist for the wildlife people, not the animal rights people. But
Okay.
and I'm not going to mention who it was.
Yeah.
And I was sitting with a couple of lobbyists, and they were talking about, this bill is like actually a very anti-human bill, which is interesting. I thought it was a really interesting point, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to, and this is, by the way, what they're trying to do with everything. They're trying to remove the human as part of the environment, as if we're something like terrible, like as if we're a scourge, as if we don't belong here for some reason. As if we don't belong on the planet, which, okay, well,
we're a part of it. We're a part of it.
Yeah, we are. We're a part of it as much as anything else. And, you can't regulate and control every single thing about the human race. And I think ultimately where I'm kind of going with this is like everything in Montpelier seems to have somewhat of an anti-human sentiment behind it, which some people watching or listening may be saying, Paul, that's extreme. What are you talking about? And I kind of get where they're coming from, because I make the argument that a lot of these legislators aren't exactly sure what they're part of. They're not aware of what they're complicit in. And a lot of it's ideologically driven, but they don't really even quite understand the ideology, right? It's kind of like a big popularity contest, and they all want to be part of it. But do you kind of see where I'm going with it? Like, there's a very behind the scenes, maybe it's like they wish that humans just weren't here, essentially.
Yeah, no, I definitely see what you're saying there. And I would say just even today, I had 2 conversations with legislators who I feel like are waking up and tuning in more to some of the agendas and the role of the lobbyists and the special interest groups, like coming in sort of new and not really knowing what's going on, and now kind of seeing like who's driving this, and what are we doing and who is this for, and hopefully being reminded, and maybe this is just my wishful thinking. I do tend to be like an optimist, but just getting back to the people.
Yeah.
It has to be about the people. Obviously, they're representatives. And so many times, right now, especially with some of the younger crew coming in really, really scare me as legislators, because they have been in the ideology,
yes.
From a school standpoint.
Oh, yes.
And how does that play into, are they representing agendas? Are they activists? Or are they true representatives representing their constituents? And that's what I feel like the issue is, one of the issues at this time.
Yeah. And it's the Greta Thunberg generation.
Yes, there is. You've got her.
I do.
There you go.
Can you hear her?
There is. And there's so much fear around it. So it's like, how much will you compromise the people to get your agenda done? And that's what we're dealing with. And I have to say on that note, I haven't talked about this. I was going to write about it. It's really intense, but I've talked to Paul Burns, executive director of VPIRG, 2 times now. The first time up on the balcony at the State House, he called me a climate denier. And I was like, okay, dude, I know the climate's changing for a long time, whatever you say, man. But anyway, this time, last Wednesday, he was in my face. All I said to him is, I said, why do you think it's okay to squeeze the people so hard to fund the renewable energy industry, because you think it's going to save the earth? Like, you think we're going to save the earth here in Vermont by squeezing people so hard and just making them pay for it. Why do you think that's okay? And he got in my face, so close to my face, and he literally goes, he's like, all right, Alison, you just tell me, I know you love fossil fuel. I know you love big oil. Come on, just admit it. You'll feel so much better. And you know what? The reason I tell that story, that is the epitome of the zealotry and that mentality that we are contending with, and that who is a lot of times driving the bill and has a lot of influence in the State House. And it's incredibly dangerous. And I'm not saying VPIRG hasn't done some good stuff, but recently their legislation, what they support, Affordable Heat Act, Renewable Energy Standard, Climate Superfund, which is very hypocritical.
Sure.
We can get into that later if you
Yeah,
want.
well, we are gonna get into it
Yeah.
because we have plenty of time here. I mean, this stuff takes time to air out and talk about. It really does
know.
because you and I, even my short time spent down in Montpelier, I've been called names. I've been called dents.
Oh yeah.
It's
People
just,
pull out all those
they
punches.
do.
I know.
Somebody said the other day, like, didn't you just host a chemtrail rally? Like they just don't even know what to think of it. It's almost too complicated for them. And that is kind of what I was getting at though. It's like, okay, I think people at home a lot of the time, and I was this when I was younger especially, I would think, okay, all those people in Montpelier, they're all, it's a grand conspiracy, man. Like they're all just trying to, they're all part. Then I've slowly learned, surely over time, okay, that's not true. It's that would be pretty complicated. But you have a lot of people that they don't really quite understand what they're complicit in, and there are people that have been there for a long time who know exactly what they're doing. And the different lobbyists, the different big name players, and there's so much money involved. By the way, even here in Vermont, there's so much money involved. And when I was like 19, 20 years old going through COVID, I was like, Phil Scott, he's in on this thing. He's with the COVID Chinese people, he's on the deep state, it's like, okay, that's not true. I figured that out. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. So I started to realize, okay, like all these legislators, it's just this big popularity contest to get them there in the first place. So who does that attract, by the way?
I know.
The worst of the worst. And I say this as a former candidate, but I can accept that. Like a lot of these people, they're just like egoic people, totally driven by, seeking admiration and that kind of stuff. And so they get there and they just want to be liked by everybody, and they want to do what the right thing is, and they want to, change the world. And they're not bad people. Right. They're just a part of something much bigger than them that they don't quite fully grasp. And I'm not saying that I do, but I am starting to get the bigger picture. Right? I mean, maybe you can speak to that a little bit. It's like,
well, I just feel like it's interesting because David Templeman and I, he's a Democrat who sits on the Agriculture Committee in the House. And we actually spoke for probably like an hour today, like a really amazing conversation. Because remind me to tell you guys what happened in the Ag Committee last Wednesday. It was amazing. There was like actually, I think, a crack in the wall, so to speak, like an opening of the mind. They were blown away. So I'll talk about that in a second. But him and I were talking today, and basically just talking about, we've got this like whole right-left thing going on, and can we do this like top-bottom thing? Like Vandana Shiva wrote the book Oneness versus the 1%. So when we realize like who has the money and runs a lot of the show and wants to legislate to aid their sort of industry, it's a lot of the big corporations, right?
Absolutely.
So if we can see it and not be divided by that and then protect ourselves from that.
Yes.
So who are we being taken advantage of continually, right? You got big pharma, you've got now the renewable energy industry coming in.
That's right.
They all want to take advantage of the legislature, hide behind a lot of the PR campaigns,
yes.
all of that plays in. And
greenwashing.
Exactly. And they're literally using the legislature to get their work done, to support their industry. And that's what's tricky is I think, like you said, there's a lot of good people in the legislature, but I don't think they see that part of it because they get wrapped up in, we got to save the planet and we got to do this work.
We're all going to die.
I know. And like that push. And so if people could get beyond the PR and if people could really see, then I think we could get back to like, let's do what's right for Vermont. You know, like how do we do this right? And get away from, wow, look at how the legislature is being taken advantage of by special interest. And that's what I see play out all the time. I look at Renewable Energy Vermont, Peter Sterling, Jonathan Dowds. They are, a trade group that are representing renewable energy. And the legislation that comes through from them, like what they try to do, 236 in Senate Finance was basically going to be like, let's make it a lot easier for all of these solar projects and renewable energy projects. They've got the renewable energy standard now, which if that passes, that's in Senate Natural Resources tomorrow. They're going to supposedly vote on that for Friday. That's the one that would increase all of our electric rates.
Yep.
It calls for 20% in-state renewables. So again, it's all pushing their special interest at the expense of Vermonters.
That's right.
And I think if the legislators could see that, that's some of what I try to talk to them about, of like, we got to do what's right for Vermont, and for Vermonters.
Yeah.
And that's the imbalance right now. Like Templeman and I were talking about, it's got to be about the people and about the environment. Like, yeah, we want to do the right thing for the environment. Of course we do. We live in Vermont. We care about our environment. All of us do. But we have to do what's right for the people too. Like
that's the implication I don't understand, especially about Vermonters. It's like, who do you guys think in Vermont doesn't care about the environment?
Exactly.
I mean, there's a handful of people.
Oh yeah.
Who are just stuck in their ways, old school. It is what it is.
Right.
But I think all of us want clean air, clean water. We want the freshest food and soil that we could possibly have. And this idea that somehow Republicans just want to destroy the planet, or conservatives, I should say, maybe not Republicans, but it's not true.
It's such a misconception.
It really is.
And it's really getting back to like, what is real environmentalism?
That's right.
And
let's talk about that.
It's like you said, it's clean air and it's clean water, and it's not polluting into our waters and our air, and it's taking care of our lands, and it's growing good food. Like, that's real environmentalism.
It's not relying on computer data and computer models to explain why we need to change the entire economy of the whole globe. Otherwise, we're all going to die.
Right. And that's a lot about pushing the carbon markets, obviously. Like, they want the carbon market going, and so much of the legislation is pushing carbon markets right now.
Well, Rob Williams writes, first of all, he writes, "Preach, Miss Despathy."
Oh,
wow.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's not a sorry.
Rob.
He means it. You know he means it. And he writes, I think he's asking this to you. He writes, "How do we encourage Vermonters to be healthy, happy, and strong?"
Right.
That's a good question.
It is a good question. It is a fundamental question. We have to take care of ourselves. We have to take care of each other. We have to allow people to be able to have time and money to do that, and not just thinking that we have the answers for everybody. And that's where you get into a social engineer versus, a representative or someone who supports the vision of everybody.
That's right. They are socially engineering this economy, this green utopia, but they're not taking into account the people that will get left behind and very badly damaged. And that's the thing. It's like, I can sit here and say, like, I'm not opposed to green technologies, quote unquote. I'm not opposed to solar energy. I'm not opposed to renewable energy, for that matter. I just don't think that we should be forcing everybody at the cost of their lives.
Exactly.
And I mean literally the cost of their lives. Like, when you're talking about some people who can't afford to heat their homes or buy food, it's one or the other. Like, that's pretty terrifying. And then you're talking about, forcing everybody into electric heat pumps and changing the way that everybody heats their homes. And I've even heard talks about banning wood stoves.
My gosh.
I hope that doesn't happen. I've heard that. It just blows my mind.
That would be so anti-Vermont.
My grandmother said that. My grandmother, she sadly passed away in October. But one of the last things I remember her saying is, "Paul, they're not going to ban wood stoves. You talk about a protest if they ban wood stoves in this state." And I said, "Graham, I don't know."
No way.
I really hope. I think she's right. I think people would just be like, "What are you guys talking about?"
I think people are seeing it more. I think the people and I think the legislators are also seeing it. But there is a command and control. They are command and control economy. Like, they literally, through the clean heat standard, if that goes through, that is them essentially really taking over the thermal sector. And then they want to try to take over the transportation sector. Yeah. And again, using carbon to be able to do that. And that is just, it's not acceptable. I mean, that's so dangerous.
Yeah, they're doing it. It seems like it's all about control. It's control of resources, control of transportation, control of even like food. Like that's a whole other part of it. But so let's talk a little bit about that. Why do you think it is that they want to have so much control over energy, for example?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, again, you're back at like the agendas and the PR and what's pushed out there, in the mainstream media. And I think there is the fear, like, we have to do something. And so many times people then look to the government, we have to legislate around this. We have to incentivize, people to do the right thing. And so that's where then we end up with people telling us, this is the kind of heat you're going to have. This is the type of house you're going to live in. This is the car you're going to drive, and what is that? Like, that's unacceptable to push that. And then they subsidize it. Right. So then it's like, OK, so I don't even have an option versus really getting into allowing the markets. And some people are totally against free markets. But a market is so important because then the people are really able to choose.
Yes.
Then they're able to say, like, oh, this works and this is affordable. Of course I want that. And then that's going to go. That's a natural market compared to we're going to subsidize the renewable energy industry. It may not work, it may not be effective, it may not be affordable, but you're all going to do it because this is what we're subsidizing.
And if we don't.
Right. And then we're penalized. Well, then it's punished.
And don't forget, too, even if it works, right, and somehow we reduce all carbon emissions in the state of Vermont, wow, I hate to break it to you all, but in China, they're still burning coal
Right.
without clean coal scrubbers to stop the particulates from getting into the atmosphere. Same in India.
Right.
Same in any third world country for that matter. And these are all development nations, don't get me wrong, but they're doing real pollution, which real pollution is particulate pollution. It's chemicals in the water. It's chemicals in the soil. It's, the some of the stuff that what is the stuff that they've been using? Pesticides.
Yes,
That's what real pollution is.
That's what we should be focusing on dealing with versus our obsession with carbon and the sort of climate stuff. And this obsession with carbon is so dangerous because it distracts from all the stuff that you just said. It really just takes us away from like what we really, really need to be focusing on. And then why are they doing all that? Why are we having all these coal plants and these refineries in India and China? Because we want what? Electric vehicles?
Yes.
We need all the mining?
Imagine that.
It's like, it's so out of control to see
There's such a disconnect.
There
And you
is.
can point this out, by the way. You can point this stuff out to people in Montpelier. You can tell them all day. And it goes in one ear and right out the other. Like they just don't want to think that that's true.
Right.
Even though they know it is true, by the
Right.
way. Because we all know China is doing very, very concerning things to their environment.
Right.
But it's just the reality. I don't quite understand it. Star City Fame writes, wars are also polluting the world, but the same governments don't want to seem to think that it adds to it all. Actually, very interesting point that you just made. And anybody that I highly recommend researching this a little bit. It's called Gottschalk's bump. It's this phenomena after World War II. They see a very much an increase in the Earth's temperature, like a drastic increase in the Earth's temperature, to the point where it's like so fast over 4 years that it's like, wow, this is crazy. And there's models where it compares like the carbon emissions and the temperature of the Earth, and like there's just different things that are showing, okay, like maybe this is why. But the theory behind it is that I believe personally, that the reason why you see this increase in temperature is because essentially you have an entire continent burning for 4 years, right? So the entire continent is burning, and it's just polluting particulates in the atmosphere at all times, which we know, that's what real pollution is, by the way. And that's what's going to give you your well, something just happened here on my stream. I don't know what. Hold on. Sorry, everybody.
Oh, yeah, no worries.
But that's what real pollution is. And it's true, that's what I believe is actually causing climate change is particulate pollution. If you want to talk about real climate change or real global warming, what actually is it? So,
well, even the war thing that they just brought up there, just you look at all the funding that goes into the war piece, you look at all of the, if you want to really actually talk about fossil fuel consumption, you look at all that goes into the war. I mean, the war machine. And it's also, it's the carbon component, I think, is also something that we really just need to dive in and talk about. Like, why are we using carbon as the metric? And obviously, we can go back to and we can say that that's all about the carbon markets, right? Like, they are trying to establish carbon markets. That is a massive commodity. And if everyone can be playing the game and we can be measuring carbon, and who does that help? It's predatory to us. It doesn't help any of us. You look at what's going on with the Nature Conservancy. Like, they are one of the biggest traders of carbon markets. They're selling them to Amazon. They're selling them to all the big companies so they can be like, look, we're carbon free and we're green, etc. And it's bogus. It's completely bogus. And that just brings me actually to what happened last Wednesday in the House Ag Committee. So I don't know, people probably remember, I'm sure, last year we passed the 30 by 30, 50 by 50. 30% of Vermont land will be conserved by 2030,
yes.
50% conserved by 2050. There was a big, massive, pushback on that. What are we talking about? How are we going to get that land? Are we going to tax people out of it? Is it eminent domain? I know Chair Sheldon from House Energy Environment, I think she was like, well, people are going to give it to us.
Yeah.
Okay. But then what ended up happening, this was mind-blowing. It was awesome. A lot of us, I think, are tuned into carbon markets and the carbon game and, how fraudulent it is and not serving and being the best way for us to look at things. And Caroline Gordon, who works for rural Vermont, but she was testifying as her own, and then Jennifer Byrne, who works for Conservation Commission, they came in and they've been part of a Pay for Ecosystem Services and Soil Health Working Group, and they've figured out, why are we doing carbon markets? This is bogus. This is the financialization, commercial, that we're commodifying nature by doing this.
That's right.
So as farmers, they were like, this 30 by 30, 50 by 50 is going to not be good for farmers. It's going to wrap people into this bogus carbon market, which is what so many of us were talking about with the clean heat standard.
Yes.
Why are we doing that? And so they present a testimony, and I have to tell you, the entire committee was completely floored. They didn't even know what to do. They were like, wait, so this wasn't a good bill? What did we just do? What are you saying about carbon markets? Like, literally shocked. And so Templeman steps up and he goes, well, are you saying all carbon markets are bad? Or should we not be doing that? Can't we make a good carbon market? Can we do a good ethical carbon market? So he was like struggling trying to figure that out. Esme Cole, young one on there, really big, in my opinion, activists, like very much like agenda driven in there, you know. And she goes, well, can we make an amendment? Can we fix it? And basically they were saying like, no, we have to repeal that. Like that's not serving Vermont. And why do we want to play this bogus carbon game? But then they all got tuned into it. And it's like, you know what? If that's the way in for us to have this real conversation about, are we really going to do this carbon thing? Are we going to make the people of Vermont pay for this carbon game through the clean heat standard, through the 30 by 30, 50 by 50?
Yeah.
Like, is this, it's so predatory. And so then Templeman and I were talking today, and, you know, it's like, well, he's like, well, I think we could do it ethically and we could do it the right way. And it's like, do we even want to play that game? Is that really how we have to do it here? And it's, you know, and then she also, Jennifer Byrne, on the Conservation Commission, she also talked about the Nature Conservancy and Vermont Land Trust having another business where they get into carbon credits and carbon trading. I have to look into that more, but it really blew my mind. Like, it's a lot of money to be made.
Oh yeah, actually, it's funny. There's a company. We can now segue maybe a little bit into the geoengineering conversation. There's a company out in, I believe, New Mexico called Make Sunsets.
Okay.
And they're geoengineering.
Of course.
Of course, yeah, to reduce sunlight. And they're selling carbon credits. So like these are tax write-offs for corporations, right? So like you help fund this company, this private company, to block out the sun.
And you get a write-off.
You get a write-off.
You get an offset.
You get an offset on your carbon, on your business.
Wow.
And that's something you can look up. Anybody that doesn't believe me out there right now, go ahead and look up Make Sunsets. I believe it's Make Sunsets or Better Sunsets.
Okay.
But I think it's Make Sunsets.
Okay.
And maybe somebody on the chat could confirm for me. But yeah, I mean, it's mind-blowing, you know. And actually, like, if you really want to dive into this geoengineering / climate change thing, it's like, it's obvious to a lot of us. This whole thing is just a giant scam.
I know.
You know, it's like this giant scam, and we're all wondering who is doing this.
Right.
You know, I think we have some ideas of who's doing it, but we don't really know. It's pretty concerning. You know, some of us feel like we're at war here in some ways, because this is dangerous stuff. I mean, we're not just talking. We're talking about like controlling the weather. I mean, that's pretty scary. You can modify entire economies. You can change the stock market. You know, you can do a lot. So anyway,
it's experimentation. I mean, just that level of experimentation on the people, the earth, the environment. I mean, all of it. It's, what are we getting into there? And that was another thing that came up in my conversation with Templeman today, because, again, we always talk about, and this goes back to what you had written. We're talking about the climate and the climate change and the climate change. But if you've got these companies out there doing experimentation with weather modification, what impact is that having, on our actual climate and our weather?
Yes, that's the most important question.
The human-induced part in that regard, I know.
And that's not accounted for. They don't account for that when in their climate modeling, their CO2 emissions modeling. They don't have any recognition of it. It's like this something that doesn't exist, right? And I mean, if you look it up, oh my God, it's conspiracy. Well,
right.
It's amazing to me how they're able to misconstrue this info, because when you do get a bare bones look at it, you're like, oh wait, okay, so UAE is making it rain in Dubai, right? By the way, Dubai, massive flooding. Everybody should look this up. Ridiculous flooding in Dubai right now. And there's some people saying it's because of the cloud seeding program that they have, which, by the way, is like totally out in the open.
Right.
We are making it rain in Dubai because we have massive drought issues, right? Huh.
I know, right?
Wow. We have all these wildfires all the time. Imagine if we could just make it rain, and it just blows my mind, because we can literally make it rain to stop them.
Oh yeah.
And people, I'm sure they'll say, oh no, there's reasons why you can't. It's bullshit.
Right.
We can stop we can stop wildfires. We can manipulate droughts, right? We can make it drought if we want to.
Right.
And I guess it's just this, like, there's just this complete disconnect between, actually I think about this a lot. It's like between military type people and like tradesmen, construction workers, people that build your housing, and like, and then all these ideologues and these academics. There's like this complete disconnect. They don't understand how things are actually done and how things are made, and even the weather being controlled, right? Like, they don't believe like that's possible,
right?
But they're actually doing it.
Exactly. And you see it in all the journals. I mean, Scientific American, Nature, NOAA, all the journals right now are just really blowing up with this conversation about weather modification.
Yeah, that's true.
It's really coming in. In Rhode Island, oh my gosh, I talked to the sponsor of the Rhode Island bill on the geoengineering. It is the best position paper I've ever seen. It is absolutely amazing. I think it's like 18 pages long, and it gets into all the different methodology.
Yes.
What we can add, what we're going to do there. And it wasn't Tennessee.
Yeah, Tennessee. They actually, governor signed it.
Yes, the governor signed it.
Bill Lee is his name. It's Bill Lee. I mix them up between Jim Lee and Bill Lee.
Okay.
Jim Lee is another geoengineering guy.
Gotcha.
And Bill Lee's governor of Tennessee. And they've banned geoengineering in the state of Tennessee, which I don't know how much that really. I mean, look, great.
I know.
Like, I'm all excited about it.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
It's a start.
But the planes don't stop at the borders of Tennessee,
I know.
and neither do electromagnetic frequencies and et cetera. So.
And are we still going tomorrow night to that Middlebury College?
Yeah, we're going. Yeah, tomorrow
There's the
night.
talk. You want to say that?
Yeah. So actually, I don't know the exact location.
I think it's 7 p.m. Middlebury College. There's a geoengineering conversation about the ethics.
Yeah.
So there were a bunch of people that were going to show up and really try to be like, let's really talk about this. We got to lay it out there. Just like the carbon market thing, we got to talk about this stuff. Do we want to do it?
Yeah, I think it's really strange to me how people will ignore the geoengineering thing.
Oh, yeah, I know.
And it's, I get it. Like I said, we're at war. Well, it's like, yeah, like it kind of does feel like that sometimes, because you're like looking up at the sky and you see it happening and you're just like, you don't really know. You're like, is that like, what is that?
Right. Is that just water vapor?
Yeah.
Or is that, yeah, exactly.
But we know at a certain level that this stuff is happening. So where do you draw the line? And, let them call us crazy all they want.
Right.
You guys are the ones who think the planet's all going to be destroyed in 10 years. So we're crazy. I mean, it's just like.
And that's where I think you also get into that, like, technology is always going to save us mentality. And like that Ministry of Future. I don't know if you know that book, that Ministry of Future.
No.
It's literally, India has this big heat wave, and then, there's a global group, and they're talking about, I forget what his name is, Robinson. But anyway, they're talking about, we have to do geoengineering. It's the only way we're going to save the planet. So it's totally this book about justification of geoengineering. It's like, oh my gosh, really? Like, that tech, is that really what we're going to do to people in the earth?
Yeah.
It's out of control.
Well, there's a handful of mad scientists that I like to call them. One of them named David Keith. He's out of Harvard, of course. And right, yeah, they're the smartest people, man. They got the greatest solutions.
Oh gosh.
So he's been on. He wrote a book about it, and I'm actually currently reading it right now. I think it's called A Case for Climate Engineering.
Yeah.
And he argues that we should be spraying some type of sulfur particulate into the atmosphere.
Isn't that why the Clean Air Act came? Because of sulfur dioxide? I mean, come on.
I actually think it might even be sulfur dioxide.
I think it is sulfur dioxide.
And his argument is like, well, it's worth it. It might only kill, it will kill pretty much 10,000 people a year. But, in the grand scheme of the entire planet over time. See, that's the thing. It's like all these mental gymnastics these people do. It blows my mind. These academics to justify the insanity. And honestly, to justify their existence.
Right.
Like, that's what it comes down to. It's like they need to have this really complicated thing that only they understand. And you plebs, I don't know how to say that word. I always say it wrong, but
both ways.
Yeah. Well, you guys don't get to have a say,
right?
And I'm the smartest person on the planet, and I'm gonna do what I want. And actually, you're gonna just deal with it.
Right. I'm the expert.
You're an idiot.
Right.
And it's like, okay, well, I don't know. Even he said that there's an interview with him and Stephen Colbert, and even Colbert was like, so we're gonna kill 10,000 people. That sounds kind
but
of.
But if people think they're saving the world by doing that, they justify it in their minds.
Yes.
And that's the danger.
It is the danger. And so now I think we can really wrap a lot of what we've talked about together, because we talked about the schools. And now we're talking a lot about this climate stuff. And it seems to me that a lot of you were saying, we have this new generation of legislators who are scary. Well,
And I don't mean all by any means,
No,
but
no,
some of
no.
the trends I'm seeing, I'm like, oh goodness, really?
Yes. So when you draw it back to the education system,
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was in fifth grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade,
Mm-hmm.
I would like be up at night, and this is not a exaggeration, thinking, "Oh my God, like we're all gonna die because of climate change. What's the point?
Right.
What's even the point? Why did I even come to this planet? You know, I'm not the only person, by the way. There's a
No, I
lot of
know.
kids who I know, like we all, and I was like the type of kid, I was like, like I was like a little Bernie guy, and I was like kind of like with it, thought it was cool, whatever.
Right.
And but that was always the fear. I mean, even by the end of high school, I didn't have any views of anything particular, but by
Mm-hmm.
the end, I was like, I don't care, the climate, like whatever.
But you
Like,
got through that, but some
I
people
did.
don't, and they just keep going.
Yeah, well, and then they end up at, say the University of Vermont, and that's why they're at the University of Vermont. That's part of the reason I wanted to go there. I know it's known as like an environmental school, and it's
Right.
like, that's really cool. How exciting. That's what attracted me to go there. But I guess like what I'm getting at is this is all much larger than just, one particular thing. Like the school budget issue is obviously
Mm-hmm.
an issue, right? But all of these things are tied together
Mm-hmm.
in this way. And I don't think a lot of Vermonters quite realize that, this climate slash all of the agendas that are being pushed within the school, which I'm not going to name them all because I just feel like we don't need to get down rabbit holes with the social issues.
Yeah.
But specifically the climate stuff and how that's being taught in school and what these teachers are teaching children, what they're not teaching children,
Mm-hmm.
and then how that translates into the future, how people get elected, the type of people that are running for office. What does that look like? And what is that going to continue to look like?
I know. Well, I think when you have schools that are really talking about, social change, and they're really sort of, I think, encouraging activism, which activism is good, but you know what you could do? You could talk about Martin Luther King. You could talk about Gandhi. You could talk about all
Yeah.
these people that have like seen what injustice and taken a stand and said, we need to do something.
Yes.
So then you talk about these role models, and then you let those people, the students are going to find their path.
That's right.
What do I care about? What am I fighting for? What do I want to dedicate my life to? Compared to like, here, it's climate. This is what you have to do. Here, it's LGBTQ, rights. This is what you have to do.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
giving them the answers, or the path versus giving them the education.
Guiding them.
Exactly. And the role models of these people, And that's where I feel like we've gone awry. One of the ways, obviously we all know there's a lot of controversy around the social change and the social justice, sort of warrior piece that
Sure.
we see unfolding. And that's where we have to get back to like, what is actual education? Yes, well, there you go. And there's Greta. Exactly.
That's who I think of,
I
right? Like I
know.
remember when I was coming out of school, like that Greta was huge.
Yeah.
And I remember like looking back at some of the girls in my class and then classes under me. It's like they all thought they were like Greta Thunberg.
Yes.
Like it's like
She becomes the role model.
She
and
does.
So dangerous.
It is
I
dangerous.
know.
It's so dangerous.
And on that note, do you mind if we maybe talk about the renewable energy standard a little bit?
No,
That's
of course,
289.
of course. Well, I have there's maybe this does it segue together? There's the meme that I made.
Oh yeah, let's talk about that in a second.
Okay,
so if I
so,
can give this
yes.
background, yeah.
For sure.
And I'm sure people are tuned into it, but the reason I feel like it's really relevant is because Senate Natural Resources is taking it up tomorrow. So the Renewable Energy Standard H289 passed the House. And this is where you got into, and this is what really drives me bonkers about this one is Department of Public Service. And hear that, right? Department of Public Service, in service to the people, right?
Sure.
TJ Poore in particular has done a tremendous amount of work with public process, public input, really getting people, Vermonters' feedback on what are the priorities around energy, in the state here. And he has a renewable energy standard, or not he, I should say Department of Public Service, that was like, I think maybe 116 million compared to then you have the REV version. So this is Renewable Energy Vermont
That's
version.
right. That's a very important group to remember, by the way.
The special interest group we'll come back to, right. And so they were pushing for what passed out of the House, that Renewable Energy Standard version. And that's the one, 20% of renewables in Vermont by 2035, which we have to talk about what that's going to look like.
Sure.
But then also for 150 to 450 million. This is out of joint fiscal office. The initial quote that they had was going to be $1 billion. And this is borne by the ratepayers over a decade. So we would be paying for this. Crazy. And
No,
even like,
not
I
us.
know.
No
Can you imagine they would do
way.
that? I know. And then Department of Public Service said, no, we don't even agree with that number. We think you're more at like 850 million. So bottom line, the renewable energy standard in Senate Natural Resources that's being looked at is a ton of money that is going to go on to the ratepayers and really funds the renewable energy industry. So Rev is loving this. You know, they're just like, oh yeah, this is feeding their whole renewable energy membership. You know, they're doing the work for their members,
Of course,
at our expense.
Yes.
You know, and that's the problem. And so I did talk to Senator Bray today after his committee meeting. I just talked to him before I came over here, and I was just talking to him. TJ Poore of Department for Public Service is going to present, and then we were talking about siting. So then we have to talk about, if you don't mind, Annette Smith from Vermonters for a Clean Environment. Like her, John Brabant, James Ellers, amazing. So Annette Smith was the only person to testify in House Energy and Environment about siting. If we're going to talk about 20% in-state renewables, where are they going to go? You know, and what is that going to do to our environment and our ag land and our ecology? And so classic example, horrible example. I wrote about this in Vermont Daily Chronicle last week. But
I think yes.
Yeah,
yes.
the Shaftesbury situation.
Yes.
So you've got literally a commodities broker, an energy broker from Connecticut who bought 200 acres in Shaftesbury and now is trying to work with the Public Utilities Commission to put up 85 acres of solar panels. 85 acres. And that includes 45 acres of clear-cut forest, 104 acres of like devastation to ag land, environment. The neighbors are in uproar.
Of course they are.
And why does he want it? Because RECs. So you talk about the carbon market, and then you talk about renewable energy credits. And renewable energy credits, they're a megawatt of energy that you produce from renewable energy that goes into the grid. They're worth so much money. You talk about a market. So this commodity broker wants to come up, produce a lot of RECs, make the money on the market,
yes, of course.
destroy the Vermont land. So again, we get taken advantage of, and this res is going to encourage that. I just saw in WCAX in Panton, Vermont, Addison County, it said we could have potentially the largest solar array, 230 football fields of a solar array in Addison County.
Holy cow. You mean Addison County? You mean the county where like some of the biggest support for Act 250 ever came from? Like all those big mansions next to the lake?
And that's where you've got, like, I think that's like Bray and Hardyland. And I don't know what's going to go on with this. It's the PUC will ultimately, you know, go through the process and interveners will come in.
Sure.
But the Shaftesbury situation and then what we're seeing here, like, and it's the same company. It's literally the same company, I'm 99% sure, that is looking at the Shaftesbury solar field and now looking at this other one in Panton. And this is where it's just, we're setting Vermont up to be taken advantage of with this renewable energy standard. When we could just revert to the original renewable energy standard we have now, or we could, if we have to do something, which they always seem like they have to do something.
We must.
We must, is the Department of Public Service, TJ Poore, has like a beautiful approach if we even have to do something.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and that's the thing is like it seems like we just get punished for being Vermonters, right? Like you can get wealthy elsewhere in this country and then you can come here and do what you want to do. But we don't even get the opportunity to do that if you're somebody who lives here. It's like so you just get to get out-competed, even to buy housing.
Right.
You know, it's like you just get out-competed by big money from not here.
Right.
And that's also what's influencing, you know, the elections and how they pass legislation in Montpelier. It's just...
Well, that goes back to your meme. So
yes,
you created this amazing meme that if you can show...
I can. This is one of my master creations. And I actually think it pissed a lot of people off because, it, you know, I posted it and I thought it was funny.
Yep.
But you can't see the meme. But I'll remind you what the meme looks like. So you have the taxpayer in the middle.
Yep.
And the taxpayer is, of course, you know, paying rates to the renewable energy companies, solar and wind and
through like electric rates or through the heating, yes.
In one way or another.
Yes.
And then you have the same taxpayer giving donations because they're so afraid to VPIRG and REV, Renewable Energy Vermont. And then you also have that voter / taxpayer voting for the Vermont Democratic Party and giving donations to the Vermont Democratic Party. So when you look at the way that the money flows, then the Vermont Democrats create a bill that will enforce renewable energy standards
Mm-hmm.
and enforce that we get rid of all carbon heating fuels, gasoline, whatever it is. So they pass these bills, and then of course the taxpayers pay, the ratepayers paying it. They're paying taxes too, by the way. And it's just like this cycle, of spin and repeat, and it just continues around and around and around. And I don't think a lot of people realize this, but VPIRG, any candidates that they endorse, they give, what is it, $1,000?
It depends. There's guy actually told me there's an open secrets page where you can see who VPIRG is given to. Sometimes it's 200, 500, 1,000. Usually senators get 1,000 if
Okay.
they endorse you. Not all candidates accept the money part of it. They might just take the endorsement, but they've got tremendous influence.
Yeah.
Tremendous influence. And honestly, I have seen legislators be afraid to not support a VPIRG bill because of the influence that VPIRG has on voters.
It's
And
textbook corruption.
it's really it's just so dangerous because yeah, it's influencing how our legislators are going to vote at the expense of the people, like putting the people at risk.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the same thing, and the same thing goes for Rev. I don't think Rev donates as much to campaigns and candidates, but that's the cycle. You nailed it. I
Yeah.
mean, that's literally what's happening. And if
Well, you helped
and if
me nail it.
voters, yeah, no problem. But if voters aren't tuned into that, then like you said, they're giving money to the Democratic Party, they're giving money to VPIRG, and then what is happening with that? I mean, excuse my language, but they're screwing themselves over because then it's just they're getting asked to bear the cost of renewable energy.
Yeah.
And we're basically asking Vermonters to subsidize renewable energy in these indirect ways by using carbon. And that's the part.
That's the big problem. It's indirect too. Like nobody even realizes a lot of the times the ways that they're getting screwed.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even understand it. There's all these hidden costs that are built into other things that you just don't know about.
Right.
And how could you?
Right.
It's so frustrating.
And also all the misinformation. Like that reminds me of when the debate on the renewable energy standard was on the House floor. Representative Mahali stood up and he was talking about how this was actually going to save Vermonters money, which was totally misinformation. And he got called out from that. Some people who are really engaged in policy,
Sure.
they reached out to him and he never corrected himself. Like the next day, I'm sorry, he could have gone on the floor and been like, hey, I misspoke. We were talking about the social benefit of doing the renewable energy standard, not the actual economic benefit for Vermonters. So there's a lot of misinformation that cruises around. And again, I will say this. My representative reached out to me. He's on the Ag Committee after the testimony last week about the carbon trading, the 30 by 30, 50 by 50 carbon issue. And he apologized. He was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I know you were trying to talk to me about this. And this is where so many times they're not informed. They're relying on what, say, someone they know or someone in another committee told them.
Yes.
And they vote based on that versus taking the time to dive in. There's so much impulsive legislation of what they want to push through.
Yeah.
Why can't a bill take 2 years? Why does it have to be pushed through in like one session? This is what we're contending with. And then they're going to keep going back like the clean heat standard, the 30 by 30, like, oops, we are so sorry. We just messed up. Now
they need to breathe. They
have to slow down.
Yeah.
I
Well,
know.
and this year, I believe, is a record. How many bills that have been introduced in the Vermont State House?
1,000 plus.
Is it 1,000 plus? I thought it was like 800, but still, I mean,
I could
1,000.
be wrong.
I mean, like it just blows my mind because when I hear about how things used to be, like 50 years ago, for example, and everybody, oh, you're trying to go back in time. No.
Right.
I'm just saying, they would finish up the session in a matter of months, or not
Right.
months, excuse me, but like 2 months.
Right.
They'd be done in the end of March. They'd be done at least by April, right?
Right.
And I think what I'm getting at is like the whole system itself, the whole state thing, state house. It used to be, some Vermonters, farmers, businessmen, whatever, business people get together and they took care of business. They said, okay, these are some things we have to take care of.
Like the budget. Right.
Because, it's kind of like your town, even like your town, like your select board, like they just get together and they're like just trying to solve your actual problems.
Right.
Like making sure your roads are good, making sure that the sewage is functioning.
Right. Infrastructure.
Infrastructure, right?
Right.
And it wasn't like this, they weren't competing with each other to become like the next big thing. Like we're going to change the entire world with what we do here in Vermont.
We want to legislate everything.
we want to legislate everything. Yeah,
know.
it's like you say, like we have to do something. Well, why do we have to do something? Why can't we just not do anything?
Right.
And I guess the point though that I'm making is like it seems like it used to be like, okay, they would go for a few months, and it was like they took care of business, and it was almost like a summer camp as opposed to like this. You know, they want to make it the full time.
Oh my
we
gosh.
need it needs to be a full time job. We need benefits. We need pay.
We would never get a break. We would all be stressed out constantly.
That's
We're already all stressed out this entire session.
That's the problem, and it's like, and I've had people say to me before, you know, I get concerned when the studio, or excuse me, when they're in session.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Because you know, like there's just like this uneasy feeling of like, okay, what are they gonna do now?
What are they gonna do to me? Exactly.
I'm having some technical difficulties here, Allison.
Okay.
I hate to break it to you.
Oh, no problem.
Okay, we're back. Never mind.
We're good?
Fixed.
Okay, cool,
We're
cool.
fixed.
You got it. Good.
So, but that's what somebody mentioned that to me though a while back. It's like that's not what this was. It wasn't like this thing. It's like become this social justice movement at all times. And if they were to be in session full year all the time, like we would be so screwed.
We have to make sure that does not happen. Exactly. And I think really one of the biggest things, at least in my opinion, when people are voting this time round, we have to make sure that people vote no. Whoever we elect votes no on the clean heat standard.
Oh yeah.
That is a nightmare. Like just what that would do to Vermonters and small businesses is just actually, in my opinion, criminal. There are already small businesses closing, like small fossil fuel dealers who have been there for their community. You know, people have their cell phone. They'll go out in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
You know, and they're shutting. Some of them are already closing because of the concerns of how am I going to provide all this information? How am I going to get these credits? What am I going to be fined? You know, it's just really a nightmare to see. And I don't even, do the legislators realize what they're doing to these small businesses that we rely on?
I don't think they care.
I don't know.
I think some of them do care. I think some of them truly understood. As the train goes by, everybody.
I know.
It's such a happening place down here.
It's good.
We got Rocket J's out front, first night of the year. Tons of cars down here right now. It's an absolute blast.
Right.
But I do partially think that a lot of them don't quite understand what they're doing, and they're following what they've been programmed to believe since they were 10.
Right.
And it's like I remember when I broke out of that. See, something keeps happening. I don't know what's going on with my controls here.
Gotcha.
But anyway, I remember when I broke out of that, like as a kid, it was just like such a mind melt when you realize, okay, wait a second, a lot of this stuff is kind of a lie. And it's just so strange. It's so strange to watch.
To see it all play out.
Yes.
I know.
It is.
And it's also tough because I think there is a lack of ability to really have a real conversation. Like many times I've just noticed in my experience with many legislators, it's like there's a lot of shutdown. They sort of already have their mind made up on something. Don't try to talk to me. I'm not going to change. You're not going to change my mind. I think how I think. And who are you to try to have this conversation? And that's such a tough one. It's like it's acknowledging and humbling ourselves that none of us know everything, and we got to try to work together. There's always something we can learn, and I have hope that it will go that way, but it's not really that way right now at the Statehouse. That's a tough one. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to make sure to talk about was Zoe Saunders.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously there's a lot of conversation happening around her, and is she going to be good, and is the Senate going to approve her, et cetera. I don't know if you saw the 7 Days article about the Bezos Academies. So like Jeff Bezos.
No.
So down in Florida, it seemed like she was part of an initiative to try to get Bezos Academies in Florida. And this would be hideous. And the reason I bring it up is because
that's really interesting.
Cannot happen in Vermont, at least in my opinion. So Bezos is supporting these Montessori schools where kids would come for free, but there's no more philanthropists anymore, not real philanthropists. They all want a return on investment, right?
Of course.
And so basically it would be, if we give free education to kids, then in order to get our return on investment, we need to collect data. So then it would come down to what data are they collecting from these kids at the schools.
Sure.
And some of the Montessori schools are really famous for this, like what they'll try to get from, because they see kids as data commodities.
Of course.
And just like carbon, data is a big thing on the market. It's probably the biggest, right?
Data, absolutely.
I would say, yeah. And so anyway, it was just interesting to see. Like, I think giving Zoe Saunders a chance is important. I think, if she can try to help us with our current situation with education, and that would be awesome, and especially someone who may not be just like locked in the public school box.
Sure.
But I think we also have to make sure that we don't get into these like public-private partnership or public-private partnerships, classic stakeholder capitalism, right? And make our kids into data commodities so that Jeff Bezos can give them a free education and get a return on investment. That concerned me so much. And I think we have to keep an eye. Again, I bring it up because I think we have to keep an eye on that.
No, I think that's really interesting because I know there's a lot of controversy about his pick for
it'll be interesting to see because I guess I found out today that she can be secretary. She just wouldn't be what would be the word, approved by the Senate.
That's right. The Senate could say, no, we're not going to confirm her.
Confirm. That's the word. Thank you.
That was a question that was actually asked at today's press conference.
Yes.
Well, Alison, I think we've covered a lot of stuff here today.
Yeah.
I am having some technical difficulties. I'm not exactly sure if I'm sure we're live, but for some reason I've lost control of the cameras.
Okay, gotcha.
So you know what? I think that's a good time for us to wrap this up.
Perfect.
And is there anything else you want to add?
Just thank you so much. It's so good to talk about things. I think we just have to keep the conversation going.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I can't wait. I'm sure we'll be back on here again.
Perfect.
And sometime in the near future. And to everyone out there watching us, thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you've enjoyed. I think we've covered some really. I will say it, and Guy, this is nothing against you, but this has been my favorite interview so far. Guy,
and you got a lot more to go.
Well, we have a lot more to go, and I think we've really talked about some pretty pressing issues, and we got into the nitty gritty of some stuff that not anybody else is talking about.
I know, and people need to. I think these are the real conversations that we need to be having, so we can try to sort this stuff out, and people can be tuned in, and we really just have to stop being taken advantage of. The legislators have to stop attacking the people. That is what is happening.
Yes.
And we all need to be able to afford here and live here and not have to be afraid of our legislators. What is up with that?
Yeah, right? Why am I afraid of my legislators? Anyway, I'm going to shut this down. Thank you so much, everybody. Hope you enjoyed. And this has been a Bean Studios production.